be for a potential outbreak of Ebola here? What would be required? What kind of containment methods do you need? What kind of facility access would be required? And do we have any of that?
Yeah. And Dimula, I think we must be very objective. In my angle as a public health expert, is that any outbreak of any nature in any country or in any region in the world, you have to put up measures to be able to contain the outbreak. And the reason is simple, so that you can be able to contain the spread of the disease. Because even a country, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is actually very clear that every Kenyan has a right to health care. And it's also the duty of the government to be able to provide that kind of health care. And therefore, we support any initiative by the government to set up any containment measures, which be it as it may, to be able to protect our citizens from falling sick. One thing we need to be very clear about is that from a public health perspective angle, is that we do not support importing suspected cases for the obvious reasons. Because, when you're talking about, East Africa, and I'm talking about Congo, and, recently we saw yesterday the PS talking about other counties, I think around 7 counties being at a high risk. And I believe Busia and other Kisumu and others, those are surrounding Uganda being mentioned, is because of the obvious. If we have porous borders, if we have borders that actually are not sensitive to outbreaks, which actually there is, we are likely to lose the very issue. And therefore, where we sit as public health officials is that we need to see a lot of work being done at our borders. Remember, that is a health security. We need to see a lot of our colleagues, the first line responders being actually trained, equipped adequately, so that in the event of anything, remember, sometimes we don't focus much on, we focus on aeroplanes, we focus on trucks. We also don't focus on the people who walk in. There are people actually in Dimuli who are DRC nationals who live in this country. Sometimes they walk through the borders and they come back. Who screens those people? That's another issue. If you look at the Ebola, even the Ebola itself, the disease itself, you look at from the incubation period of the 21 days, I can go to Congo, I can go to DRC, to Uganda, by whichever way, because I have relatives there, for example. And, because of the period of their symptomatic nature, I might not be able to show the sign. Even the screening might not be able to reveal the signs. But when I come in, because you cannot be able to see the signs, I come and then interact with the community. You realize that after some 21 or 21 days, the symptoms start actually coming in because of the whole issue.
And now that you're talking about science, how does Ebola present itself? Because I think probably many people have been misinformed that once someone is infected and within a very short time, the signs are very visible, including on the skin. Is that true?
If Ebola's phases, it comes in terms of phases. They have the dry phase, which we say is actually the dry phase, and then the wet phase. The dry phase, when maybe you can be able to see maybe the vomit, the coughing, the throats, the temperatures, the muscle fatigue, and what have you. But then from there, if it's actually not well managed, it now goes to the wet phase, where we talk about the diarrhea, the vomit, the loss of fluids.
And how long does it take to get fully blown Ebola from the time of infection?
After, it has an incubation period from between 2 to 21 days. So it advances with each and every stage. If you don't manage it from stage 1, where I'm saying the dry phase, and then it progresses to stage 2, where now we're talking about the wet phase, then the hemorrhagic phase. That's at that time now it becomes full blown at the tail end. But between days 10 to 21, that's the time now the real symptoms start manifesting themselves. And therefore we, as public health, we're actually very clear on how to be able to monitor. And that's why I'm talking about the surveillance system. Because as PHOs, what we need to do, we usually activate our surveillance. We have our surveillance officers at each and every border who actually use their mandates to be able to screen.
It's possible to screen everyone who's crossing even.
That's what I'm saying. It's a challenge. It's a good challenge. We do not have enough workforce. For example, we have not, like the one we're talking about, one quarantine facility. Personally, as public health officer, I do not have a problem with government setting up a quarantine facility in Kenya. my problem, and it has to be on record, is when you are telling us that you are setting up a quarantine facility to import Americans who actually suspected of the Ebola to come in our country. That is actually the whole issue, and that should be the point of discussion. And again, we also need to come out clearly and maybe bring out there's something called fear. When we bring out the facts, the fears actually will actually be able to run away. Facts facts are actually very stubborn sometimes. So the issue should be, how do we now be able to manage and prepare for any eventuality? Remember, sometimes it's also not good. It's not also actually not easy also to manage an outbreak. Remember, we are talking about people who actually walk in, walk out. They actually might come in with other issues and maybe put us at risk. So it is actually the duty of the government to set up more quarantine. And I'm not talking about even like keep you alone. We need to have a lot of isolation centers, quarantine facilities, especially for us as Kenyans. You never know. For us, so that we can be able to contain. When you're talking about contact tracing, we're talking about you are tracing somebody who has been to DRC, for example. In Dimuri, you have friends who are drivers, for example. People who crisscross the borders. Those people are actually working. And you cannot be able to, and there are so many. I mean, you go to Malaba, you go to wherever borders.
So it's practically impossible to contain all of them just by monitoring the
You can't, and even if you were to have the screening aspect, it's also not going to be very much possible to screen actually. Like I remember I told you, we concentrate most on trucks and maybe aeroplanes. Do we actually look at the people who walk in and walk out? By foot. Right. And remember, even our workforce is actually very lean. And that's why even right now, we need to be talking about emergency employment of adequate personnel, adequate doctors, adequate public health officers, adequate nurses, CEO to be able to contain the same.
Bill, because you're a representative of